Hey podcast, in this episode I'm talking to Sarah Ivey. I'm not going to say too much, just want to get straight to the episode, but I will say a couple of things. I do try and say entrepreneurial, and I sort of botch it, but you get what I'm saying. And also too, the last, I guess from 35 minutes onwards, is just pure gold from Sarah, so definitely worth the listen. So yeah, I'll catch you at the end. Welcome to episode 7 of the podcast. Today I've got Sarah with me. Sarah is a former owner of the men's grooming centre up in Blaxland, from an outside looking in, a very successful barbershop she had there. And now she's sort of changed direction in her life, so it would seem. But anyway, I'll just leave it up to Sarah to introduce herself. Sarah?
So my name's Sarah. I was the owner of the men's grooming centre for 11 years, which I ran by myself. I started it when I was 23. I saw a great need in the area for professional services for men. I felt hairdressing salons were missing them and sweeping them under the rug is not important. So for me, it was something that I was quite passionate about.
So men's grooming, hairdresser. Was that something you went into, I guess, after you left school, or did you sort of leave school, do the things that we do when we leave school and then decide to head into sort of hairdressing?
So I left school with the intention of hairdressing. I actually couldn't find an apprenticeship in my area in a hairdressing salon. So I started working at a barber shop in Pendle Hill, and my view of it was that if I worked in a barber shop, at least for a year, that I was 12 months ahead of not starting an apprenticeship and not beginning TAFE. I worked there for 4 years and I completed my apprenticeship there. Interesting side note, my boss actually, during my last year of my apprenticeship, he actually came down with melanoma and he was treated with chemotherapy. And during that time, I think I was 21, I actually ran the shop for 12 months by myself.
Oh wow, that's a lot to take on such a young age.
That, I guess, gave me the confidence to, at 23, open my own business, because I felt like, apart from obviously paying the bills and, signing on the dotted line, I'd done the work, which was the day-to-day running of the shop.
So you worked there for a year, basically, because of your boss having what happened to him, having the melanoma, you basically, I guess, run the show. So how long did you do that for?
So I'd done my 3 years of my apprenticeship already, and it was my 4th year of my apprenticeship that I ran the shop for pretty much the whole year. And he had the intention of selling the business, and I actually was quite motivated at the time to move into the ladies' hairdressing. He basically sold the shop. And once he sold the shop, I then moved into ladies' hairdressing, which I did for about 2.5 years.
When you wanted to get into hairdressing, it was more for ladies' hairdressing at the beginning?
I began with the passion for ladies' hairdressing, and then after working in the barber shop, I then made the decision that I really needed to give it a go to see if it was what I wanted to do. And finishing my apprenticeship was, I guess, a finishing point of something and the starting point of a new beginning. And a good time to go in, still sort of a little rusty on a few things, but not so far into your time in a trade that people turn their nose up at not being perfect at all aspects.
The decision to open up your own shop, how did that come about? Talk us through that.
So after 2.5 years of hairdressing, I'm, I guess, not really a typical hairdresser. I'm very straight down the line, straightforward, polite, friendly, but not over the top kind of girly girl. And the hairdressing salon environment wasn't really my cup of tea. I was good at what I did, but I probably wasn't good at pretending to be somebody I wasn't.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so after 2.5 years, I'd had enough of what felt to me like schoolyard cattiness and bitching and carrying on, I made the decision that I was not going to cut hair anymore at all. That I was going to hang up my scissors and move into a different industry. After a few long discussions with some family members and friends who convinced me that I used to enjoy barbering and that I should go back to it, I actually applied for a job and was told it wasn't quite the right time. In that moment, I then went, righto, well, I'll just open my own shop. So knowing that there was a person who closed their business down, or at the time was potentially selling their business, and I went in with intention to buy it, but he'd actually already closed it down. So that then left a gap in the market, which was the Blaxland market, and I just saw it as a great opportunity to target a market which was now empty.
Up in the mountains, there wouldn't be too many men's hairdressers up there.
So I'm pretty sure as it stands, when I opened my shop, there was one in Emu Plains, which was actually the one that I applied for a job at, which she deeply regretted not hiring me, because she then obviously found out I'd opened my own shop. And then the next shop from me is Springwood. So it's a fairly large chunk of the lower mountains that was really untouched for men's haircuts.
You apply for the job in the Emu Plains one, you know, you get rejected essentially. How did that feel? Was it hard for you to sort of come back from that, or was it probably a catalyst for you to then make the decision, okay, you know what, if they're not going to employ me, then I'm going to start my own shop?
I know I'm good at what I do, and I know I'd done it for other people, and that people liked what I did and returned to me. So I guess being 23, I viewed it as, I knew she'd made a bad decision, and she probably knew it at the time as well, but she just didn't, I guess, have the foresight to see that what could actually come of it. And so for me at 23, I just thought, well, literally got nothing to lose. I know I'm good at what I do, so why not do it for myself?
Yeah, because I feel as though 23 is a young age to be getting told, you know, you're talking about a job that you really want to do, and then all of a sudden told not to. Like, a lot of 23-year-olds will probably take that to heart and probably won't do anything till quite a while after that. So it's actually quite good to know that, you know, part of you, maybe like, would you say maybe entrepreneurial, whatever the word is, within you? Do you think it's because you had that and knew that you were able to make that decision?
I don't know if I've ever viewed myself as an entrepreneur. I'm a very hard worker. I always have been, and I've always been a very honest and very reliable person. It's just in my nature. I wasn't a person to call in sick. I would always stay back. I would always do my job. And when my team needed me, I would be there. I would pick up other people's pieces. And I guess that for me was probably more of a motivator to do it for myself, was that I already did it for other people. So doing it for myself was no different.
Gotcha. So where it is on the Great Western Highway, the shop. So tell me, how did the location come about? Like, how much time did you use? Did you spend sort of researching the area?
I was 23. I didn't spend much time at all. So the shop that had closed down was behind Blaxland Shops. It was a really, really small shop that basically would only ever fit one barber's chair. And I guess I didn't really see myself working alone for the rest of my life. I didn't want to just plod away by myself. I thought, you know, I'd like to maybe have one person with me or two, you know, a little bit of a team. And the only shop that was vacant within Blaxland and Glenbrook was actually the shop where I ended up, which is on the Great Western Highway near the Lapston Hotel. It was the only vacant shop, so it was sort of my only option. Okay, yeah. And I knew the guy had only closed down probably a month prior, so the market really needed to be tapped into immediately.
Yeah. What sort of support did you have? Because it's quite a big, you know, task to take on for a 23 but for anybody, any age. What was the support that you had, I guess, in the early stages?
My family basically helped me with every step of the way. Barbering's very luckily one of the only industries where you really only need a chair and a mirror. You don't need fancy flooring or fancy walls or, you know, big expensive equipment. Every hairdresser has their own equipment. So I really only needed a chair and a mirror to do what I needed to do. So to begin with, I literally only had one chair in the shop and a bench space. But that was all done. I had family and friends putting the floor down. I spent, you know, days painting the shop. I remember my brother picking up the barber's chairs for me and doing running around to get it up and happening. So I actually signed the lease. I can't remember what day of the week it was. I think it was a Friday. And I opened the shop Monday week. So I knew in the lead up to getting the keys for the lease that it was going to be a mammoth task to get the shop ready in a week. But I was motivated to do it. And once I set my mind to something, then it's going to happen.
How long do you think from the decision to say, yep, I'm going to open up my own barber, to like basically your first day opening? What sort of time are you looking at?
So I sort of looked into like where I could potentially open the shop, and did some research into the building and signing a lease. And it was probably within a week that I had signed the lease.
Oh, wow.
And the ball was rolling. It was happening really quickly, and I was too young to really think about what happens if it fails. As I said, I had nothing to lose. I had no house. I had no car. Well, I owned my own car. And being a barber shop, I borrowed the money that I needed from family. So I didn't have to take out a bank loan to establish myself.
Do you have any mentors? Like, because it's sounding like, you know, you're very business oriented person, the way you think from what you've been talking about. Do you have any mentors or people that you sort of looked up to that sort of made you think, okay, they did it, I can do it?
The guy who taught me to cut hair, he's still actually a very close friend of mine. I'm in regular contact with him. And he was a person who I wouldn't really say I went to with problems and had problem solving conversations with him. There was probably a few phone calls along the way where I said, how do I deal with this? How could I do this better? But that comes with age and learning as well. He'd probably say there was more conversations than I would. But he played a huge role in it. And to this day, I look at what he did as amazing and how long he had his business for, and the hurdles he had himself as opposed to the hurdles I had. They were very different. But we've learnt a lot from each other, I would say.
I guess obvious question, you know, you're a female running a men's hairdresser. Were there any challenges with that, do you find, or do you feel as though you were, I guess, quite lucky that people were willing to support you from the beginning?
I found it really challenging in the beginning, being a female, especially the market up there had been dealing with an older gentleman for a really long time, and a lot of I would say the men over 70 had probably never had their hair cut by a woman, and would actually come and look in my shop window and see me and turn around and walk away because I was a young girl.
Very, because I guess the mountains is, you would say, maybe a traditional area.
Most definitely, very, very traditional. And there was a little part of me every time I saw them walk away, I wanted to run out and say to them, come in and give me a chance. And if you don't like what I do, then you don't have to pay. But if you do like what I do, then nobody's lost anything. So that was a big challenge, and I remember that vividly. But at the same time, I remember my first ever return customer.
Oh, nice.
And he came back for his second haircut, and he was a person that I'd never come across before. He was literally just a brand new customer, and here he came in for his second haircut, and I was ecstatic with myself. I knew I'd done it.
You've done something to make this particular person come back for another haircut. You know, you talk about, you know, being female up there. Were there any other challenges that you came across?
Early on, I was probably not as confident and as comfortable with confrontation as I am now. That's something that I've definitely learnt along the way. And there probably were, in the early days, a few people who pushed me over a little.
Okay.
And I guess as the business grew, I then saw it as not so much, you know, it's okay for someone to push me around, but they can't push my staff around. I as an employer have a duty of care to ensure that my staff are safe and comfortable in their environment. And that's something I had to learn to do. And I wouldn't say I'm comfortable with confrontation, but I'm more than happy to say what needs to be said and to stand up when something needs to be said.
Yes, those kind of things are only really learnt on the job type training. You can't really train anybody you can do all the role play that you want to deal with confrontation, but until you're in that situation, and from the sounds of it, it's something you were uncomfortable with in the beginning, but as you went on, obviously grew confidence and was able to do it quite easily. How long was it you by yourself?
So I was cutting hair by myself probably at least 3 years. I did have someone come in on a Saturday and help out around the shop, answering the phones and all the other, basically everything except cut hair.
Yeah.
And then I started with a part-timer who she actually didn't last very long. And I ended up with an apprentice, and I had a few apprentices along the way, who was my intention to train them up and get them working alongside me, so that I could have a day off and a bit of time off. And I ended up, after I think it was about 2 or 3 apprentices, I ended up hiring someone part-time who they actually didn't finish up until I sold the business.
Oh, wow.
So they were with me was 6 years.
Was it just purely you saw that, you know, things were starting to get busy, that you sort of were wanting to employ somebody, and also up to that point it was just you, so you were essentially, I guess, self-employed, you would say, and I guess the leap to hire somebody to know that this is your baby, you know, the hairdressers, you've got someone else now that you're going to have to try and trust to maintain the standards that you've set. How was that, and how did you deal with it?
A huge thing for me is a haircut is actually a walking advertisement for you.
Definitely.
It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It's the customer that, you know, they're the ones who are putting the money in the till, so they're the ones who have the opinion. And to literally put your reputation in someone else's hands and let them do haircuts and let your reputation walk out the door with somebody else's name on it is something that I probably still struggle with a bit. I was probably, I would come across very overbearing to begin with, but it was something that I'd worked really hard for as well. And a high standard says a lot about you as a person. And I even remember people saying to me, oh, don't worry, I'm not too fussy, that'll do, you know, just whatever. And I'd say to them, well, no, because if somebody asks where you've had this done, I want them to not frown upon what I've done, whether you like it or not. It's important that people respect what I've done. And you're literally walking around with someone's advertisement.
And so along the way, you then meet Jono, you get married, you've got a partner and then a husband. How was that, you know, trying to juggle all that together, going from being, you know, basically just yourself?
It was probably the best thing that happened for my business.
Oh, wow.
Jono came from a management role in his industry that he was in. And he's a very strong, confident, outspoken person. And I guess he really tapped into that side of me.
Okay.
And I think he made me a better boss. I was probably a lot firmer, but I was a better boss. I was probably better in dealing with my customers.
Because before then, did you have anybody that you could bounce sort of things off?
I did have my family, but I probably, as most people do, don't really listen to their family probably as much as they should. And your family can probably tell you things 100 times over, and especially your parents. You know, you don't really listen to what they say sometimes.
No, never.
But being a partner and having a completely fresh perspective, he didn't have any ulterior motive for me. It was literally to encourage me and help me. So I took what he said as gospel.
Yeah. Until recently, you had beautiful Harper. When you guys ended up having her, was that part of the plan? And how was it talking about it in relation to the business?
So part of my plan is actually to move out of Sydney. My husband and I are planning to move to Albury.
Yep.
And long term, I didn't see myself owning a business and living 5 hours away. Yep. According to me, a barbershop's something you really need to be in for it to be successful. There probably are people who run very successful barbershops not working in them, but I couldn't get my head around it, and it's not something that I feel is the right way to do it, but that's me. It's not the right way for me. And so basically when we fell pregnant, we made the decision that that was the right time to put the shop on the market, and it was the right time for us to take a step back. I'd done it for a long time, and I'd worked so hard that I guess I saw having a baby as a great time to step back and to move away, and to do it without, feeling like I'm saying it's all too hard or it's all too much. It's that I have a different passion now, and I long term don't want to hold on to a barbershop and live interstate. So it was all part of a joint long term goal.
Do you think so? Until she came along, it was sort of just, you were still just going with business as usual, was it?
We'd discussed moving out of Sydney prior to her coming along and being born. But I guess that was a big motivator. Once she was born, it was, kind of, why bother? There's more important things to worry about than who's there, and going and doing banking and paying bills, and just changes your perspective, really. And I wouldn't say that I will never own my own shop, but at the moment it's just not on my table.
Did that make the decision to sell the shop easier, knowing that, you talk about perspective, so she's here, and it's like a lot easier to say goodbye, whereas if she wasn't here, would it have been a little bit harder to say goodbye to the shop? So we put the shop on the market basically as soon as I fell pregnant, and it actually took 6 months. It took 12 months for the shop to sell. So once she was born, if it had sold before she was born, there would have been a little bit of me that was a bit heartbroken and a bit devastated. But the fact that it happened after she was born, and the fact that I'd already stepped out, I'd been out of the shop basically for 5 months. And I had this little baby that I didn't want to go back to work. I didn't want to have to. And it's a little bit sad, but also it made it a bit easier. Sad that I wasn't
disappointed and that I was at the point of just being done with it all. But at the same time, it made it easier to say goodbye to.
Yeah, because I think one thing I like to talk about is, we can always have these plans that we like to make prior to having kids, and they're always so easy to make prior to having kids. But then as soon as you have kids, it's just a totally different, your emotions really start to kick in, especially being a mother. I always say that mothers have a harder time than dads because, you hold onto the child for 9 months, all that kind of stuff. So you've got a more of a closer connection. But that's the thing, kids do what kids do, I guess, and I think a lot of people can attest to that.
I saw my friends who were having 12 months off with their babies and getting closer and closer to the time that I was having off, really needing to come to an end if the shop hadn't sold. I really needed to step back in, and I wasn't mentally prepared to do that at all. And I was struggling with the fact that I might have to step back in. So at the time that it sold, it was a huge relief. I wasn't ready to go back to work. I wasn't ready to leave her in care of other people. And I also don't think, a lot of people said, oh, well, why don't you just take her to work with you? But I don't think, being your own business owner, you can do that kind of thing. But I also don't think that's very fair on a baby to expect them to just hang around while you do your business. Some people unfortunately have no choice. But for me, a baby hanging around a barbershop wasn't what I wanted.
I just need to cut in here. The audio went funny on my microphone for this question, but here I ask Sarah how her and Jono are going about, I guess, trying to juggle everything at the same time and I guess get that balance that we all are after, especially after we have kids.
So Jono actually has weekdays off. He works his weekends. And so I made the decision that I could go in and work just a few hours a week. And in doing that, I could continue my breastfeeding of Harper and I could continue my bond and feeling like I'm still a stay-at-home mum. It gave me a little bit of an opportunity to be out of the house, but also gave Jono a good opportunity to be the responsible adult. I think sometimes as mothers, we tend to maybe tell our husbands what to do a lot of the time. We know when bath day is. We know when washing needs to be done. We know how much we feed them and what time we feed them and what time they need to go to bed. And Jono's amazing with Harper. Every time I ask him to do something, he will always do it, but it's been great to actually watch him blossom into making his own decisions and learning what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. So he minds her. And I feel as if she had to go to daycare instead of being at home with him, I probably wouldn't have been ready to go back. But because she's with him, I feel that that's okay. And I feel it's important for me to go back to work and to have that social interaction. And I feel it's important for Harper to have that time with her dad as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you feel, it's going to sound like a silly question, there's talk about pressure on mothers. Do you feel as though you had pressure on yourself to sort of make decisions on what you were going to do next, or do you feel it was quite easy for you to make decisions that you've come to now?
I've been very lucky. Jono is very, very supportive in what decisions I make. He's never one to tell me what to do, but he's always one to encourage what I feel and how I feel. And selling the business was a big part of that. And him learning what I was okay with and what I wasn't okay with in the sale process and how to support me in that. And in being a mother, he's been very supportive in, as much as I want to work or as little as I want to work. If I wasn't ready to go back, we would have found other ways to pay for things or, cut back on things that we didn't need. But I guess when you've got that, you know, the little bit of extra income, you spend a little bit more. It's kind of the nature of us.
Yeah, and that is you're right. That's just a problem that everyone faces, that we all like to think, you know, the more money we have, the better off we'll be. But often the case is that the more money we have, the more we find to spend the money on. So,
Most definitely.
But it's good to hear that, I guess, you were talking about having a plan that, you know, that was part of the plan, was just to, I guess, cut back on all the things that you didn't need in order for you to get that, you know, that one-on-one time that I think is very important for a mother, especially the stress that they go through if it is when they are looking at sort of heading back to work. I often talk to Sarah and I just say, look, you know, we'll just have to cut, you know, I'd rather not have Netflix, for example, than have you stress over not being there for Archer or Harvey. So that's really good to hear that was actually part of the plan. Yeah,
it's something that you make decisions as a couple as of what's right for you and what works for your family. And some people go back really quickly and some people don't go back to work at all. But for us, you know, it's always been a little bit, I took one step at a time and went back for a few hours, made that commitment that I'd do 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
And then once I was comfortable with that, I actually got offered another job. And that's doing reception at a hairdressing salon, which that suits me just fine. And again, that's on Jono's day off. So he minds her and takes care of her.
Yeah, cool.
But if I had to cut back on either of those jobs, if I wasn't comfortable, then we would have figured it out.
Yeah. So you talk about the plan is to move down to Albury. Is there a time frame that you're looking at there, or is it just you'll get there, it's just a matter of when the time is right?
So I guess, again, it's a financially motivated decision as opposed to a time decision. Having sold the business means there's nothing holding us in Sydney. So if we decided that we'd had enough, we could pack up and leave tomorrow. But for us, it's about making sure that when we sell our home in Sydney and purchase a home or build a home in Albury, that we make sure it's financially the best opportunity that we can give ourselves. So time's not really of the essence. It's more about making sure that we get as much as we can for our Sydney home. To give us a head start and I guess to take the pressure off, which is a lot of the reason of moving out of Sydney, is the financial pressures in Sydney are huge. So we can upgrade in a home in a different area and be financially better off.
And that does make it a bit easier because you've got family that are down there too, so that's always a good thing to have. It's
good to have the support and to know that, you know, if I needed to go to work on a weekend, that potentially my mum would then be there to mind Harper, or my dad. Just gives us a few more options to have family around who can support us in that. We do have family in Sydney, but we also were very independent people, I would say, and we don't like to ask people to come and, you know, I don't feel like it's right, as my personal perspective, to ask my parent to mind Harper every week. You know, if you needed to, absolutely, and there are people who need to. My dad currently minds Harper once every 2 months on a Saturday so that I can do a bit of work, and my mother-in-law does the same. But I'd feel like any more of asking of them would be a big commitment for them. And that's a big ask of me as well. I'm quite an independent person and I don't, you know, I feel like Jono and I, we can do it on our own.
Yeah. We've got this sorted, don't worry. Look, I must say, I remember when the shop first opened, it was quite easy just to rock up and get a haircut, you know. you just had to sit there for a little bit, and then you get a haircut. But as time went on, you then had to like book in to get your haircut. So it was quite. So I could see it from my point of view, definitely how busy you were getting, and just the obviously just a great job that you were doing. So you obviously built the barber shop up to be quite successful. Do you have any tips maybe for people who maybe wanting to go along the same path, but maybe holding back, or what would you say to, I guess, anyone that might be in your situation that you were in?
A huge thing for me is know what you are good at and do it. Commit to it. Don't try and please everybody, because there is no way you'll please everybody. I know I'm good at cutting men's hair, and I would often have ladies come in and ask me why I couldn't cut their hair, but that's not what I did. I cut men's hair, and that's what I did, and that's what I did well. I don't need to be doing waxing and be making coffee for them and to be serving beer. People came to me for a haircut, and that was it. If they could have a good conversation or a good chat and it was a nice environment, then that was a bonus. But the haircut is what they're there for. Put your energy into what you are good at and stick to it. And a lot of it comes, you've got to be in the right place at the right time for businesses to be successful. You can be the best at what you do, and if you've got poor timing, it might not work. But if you know you're good at it, push for it.
Go for it.
And stick to your guns. Don't let people waver you from what you do. Nobody goes into McDonald's and complains why they don't make KFC burgers.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's do McDonald's, and they do that. KFC do what they do. Do what you do, and don't try and put every hat on for every person.
That's some really good advice, especially from someone who actually applied it to her business. So I can't really add on to that. That was pretty. That was a good way to end it. So Sarah, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for interviewing me.
No problem. Thank you.
So there you have it. Really great chat that I had of Sarah. Just chatting to her, I felt like afterwards going up and opening up my own barbershop, or actually just doing whatever it is that I want to do, because really inspirational story that she has. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you next week.